All right, so as you can see, we've got the Jeep up on jack stands today, and nothing's broke, but we did beat the hell out of it over 9 days off-roading, hit some pretty hard smashes and things like that.
I do end up finding some significant trail damage to one of the lower control arm mounting brackets, so we'll take the time to bend that back into place, and we'll remedy this problem with a really cool product from Metal Cloak.
And I've got it cleaned up, but I want to do some maintenance today, and there's a couple things I want to address. One, I'm clearly going to check the front end alignment, make sure nothing moved, right? I mean, we beat it up a little bit. Number two, I noticed a couple of things. You may remember I was actually having a little bit of rubbage on this inner fender liner. And again, we may be getting rid of the inner fender liners and going to something aftermarket for both fenders and fender liners. But you know what? I haven't torn these up yet, so we might as well keep using them until we do. But I did notice something, and that is with some measurements against the tire and the rear pinch seam here, I noticed there was almost a 1/4 inch difference between the driver's side and passenger side. Passenger side being back just a little bit. Now, here's the interesting thing. I have the Metal Cloak 3-inch game changer suspension. When I installed that, I put everything completely symmetrical, exact distances and lengths on the control arms from side to side, but even the brackets that are welded onto the chassis sometimes aren't perfect. So, and how the tub sits on the chassis can be a little different too. So I'm going to address that today, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go ahead and on the passenger side, I'm going to loosen both control arms. I'm going to pull those in just slightly, maybe 1 or 2 turns, and get that trued up a little bit better. And the last thing I want to do is, since I'm going to be rotating the tires today, I do this frequently because I'm trying to get as many miles as I can out of these Patagonias. I'm actually going to be checking the tread depth today, and let's look at the mileage and see how these tires are wearing based on the mileage we have and a lot of off-road miles, but a lot of on-road highway miles getting from destination to destination too. But let's check and see how they're wearing. We're probably going to switch to maybe a Nitto next, just to try something new. But these tires have been very good to me. Knock on wood, no, haven't cut a sidewall or anything, and they're wearing really evenly. But yeah, let's get started. We've got some work to do. All right, now just remember a rotation pattern. Spare tire goes to right rear goes to right front comes back to left right. Wait, what? Yeah, right front comes back to left right. Left right goes up to left front, and left front ends up back on the spare.
Nailed it! So I won't drag you guys through all the measurements that I do, but I basically take a set of calipers and I measure the tread depth at various places around the tire and kind of get an average. But these tires didn't really have a lot of variation in the tread depth around the circumference.
All right, so I took a quick measurement of the tires. You can see what is now on the spare, right? This was the right front or left front. What was the spare, which is right rear now, is 0.43 inches, and that is really close to 7/16 of an inch. You give you an idea, 7/16 to be 14/32, right? These tires start with 19/32 tread depth. So 14/32 or 7/16, you can see I've only used about 6/32 of an inch tread on these tires, and I've got about 16,000 miles on them. So, and the rest, the ones that weren't on the spare, obviously, that wore down since the last rotation, they're not far behind. So yeah, I think we're getting pretty good mileage out of these Milestar Patagonias. Hey, if you guys are finding any part of this video useful, or you just enjoy watching it, do me a small favor, hit the like button and subscribe down below. It doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps me out. Remember, yeah, we do our toe off the rotors, and if you haven't seen this yet, go check out the alignment video. But I always check this just to make sure something isn't bent, like a tie rod or something like that. So we're all set up here, and then take a close look. We're right at 68 in the front and right at 68 1/8 in the back, or just under. So that's pretty darn good. Nothing moved. We're sitting right at just under an 1/8 inch toe. something one of my old mentors taught me about front ends when I was working in an alignment shop is a way to check your ball joints. Once you got your tires back on and they're up in the air, what you can do is take something like a crowbar to give yourself some leverage and actually slide that under the tire. And while you push on the top of the tire, pry up on the outside. And if you feel any rocking in here, that's a good indication you've got a bad ball joint. Right now, that feels pretty darn good. But I'll check both sides. Yep, that feels really good. And what you would see in this type of situation from underside is you'd see a slight bit of movement in either the ball joint here or the ball joint on top. And a lot of times it's the ball joint up on top, right in here, that will create a lot of movement. Again, both of those take a beating. This is a really good way to check to see if you've got a ball joint issue.
All right, tires moved around, front end checked out. Time to make those small adjustments to the right rear control arms.
Couldn't quite get the impact wrench in here. Okay, so we're gonna pull this in one full turn. Half a turn, one turn. And you have to go full turns because if you look at this, this has an offset to it. So you can't do a half a turn. Notice I'm only doing one arm at a time here, and that's because we don't just want the right side of the axle flopping around and be really difficult to get your bolts realigned. Good old flag nuts, you gotta love them. Make sure you bust this loose before you pull this bolt out. Otherwise, the whole thing's gonna want to twist, and it's really gonna put all the stress on the back joint back there. All right, something to check out. I don't know if you guys can see this very well on the camera, but you'll notice that took a pretty gnarly hit right here on the bracket for the control arm, lower control arm, and you can see it did a pretty good job of bending that in there. And so I've got a small remedy for that. Comes from my guys at Metal Cloak, and that is a lower control arm bracket skid plate. And what we're going to be doing is, while we're adjusting these to this control arm, I'm going to go ahead and pull that off, and we're going to go ahead and mount this guy right there to help protect our lower shock mount and bracket. So here's a pretty good view of just how much that was bent in on the control arm bracket. Clearly landed on a rock when we were wheeling, probably just inside the tire here, but just enough to really roll that in. So I'm going to go ahead and bend that back out to where it's supposed to be before I put the new bracket on, or the new skid plate on. All right, so the light here might kind of suck. Might be tough to see, but the way I'm going about this is taking a crescent wrench, setting it up nice and thin to fit the gauge of the steel, sliding it over the edge, and then prying that, bending that back out. Now, something important to do here, guys, is be sure to put your bolt back through here with the control arm out so you're not prying the whole bracket open, right? You just want to bend this bent section back and keep this distance where the actual control arm goes. Keep that distance in here intact, right? We don't want to open this up. And there you have it. Now, it's not perfect, but I gotta tell you, That's a whole lot better than it was. And remember, we're putting a new skid plate over the whole thing that will protect this going forward. Metal cloak skid plates for that lower control arm actually come with new bolts, washers, and lock nuts. Probably a really good idea to use these because it's going to be a little wider with that skid plate on there. Okay, now it's important to remember, you can snug these up, right? Snug them all up, but we don't want to torque those down until we know the Jeep is sitting on its own weight, because we want the bushings in there to rest at the point where the vehicle is on its own weight. Okay, so on the driver's side, although we haven't bent the whole control arm mount, you can see we've made contact with some rocks on this side too and chingered some things up. So yeah, I think these skid plates for the low-hanging brackets here are gonna pay off. So you can call me anal if you want, but this area that's been beat up right here by rocks and things, I'm actually going to go ahead and grind that down because it's all flared over. I'll grind it down. That way the new skid plate sits nice and flat here. And then I'll go ahead and spray that with some paint because frankly, I don't want rust getting out of hand down here. There we go, all cleaned up and ready for paint. It's a little thick, but that's all right. Remember, don't torque these down until it's sitting on its own weight. So just wrapping up, Jeep back on the ground, retorqued all bolts in the lower control arms, double checked even the ones I didn't loosen today. But yeah, everything is really good. And so tires rotated, checked the alignment on the front, everything's good. And we got some new skid plates on the rear shocks to help protect those brackets. So, and all that before lunchtime. Pretty cool. Hope you guys are having a good Saturday. I think it's Saturday. It's a holiday weekend.